from Vermont. I managed the dairy for a while. I taught some dairy science for a longer while. I practiced veterinary medicine for a while. I'm not the star of the show. The star of the show are panelists here. And we have two farmers and two experts, and we're hoping to let you hear how the rubber hits the road when it comes to getting the most out of your milk samples that you test through your DHIA. I'm going to ask each panelist one by one to tell us your name, a little bit about your organization, and we have 50 minutes, so take your time and do a good job. And also tell us how you interact with Dairy One, if you would. Panelists, are you ready? Did you receive your orders? Okay. I'm going to start with Gabe.
Good afternoon.
How's that? My name is Gabriel Carpenter. I head up the dairy sales and nutrition team for Keystone Mills. We are a multi-species feed mill. The main office is just about 5 miles south of here in Romulus, and we have 3 manufacturing sites in New York, one in Moravia, a organic non-GMO mill in Romulus, and then also our main office in Romulus. We service farms within a 150-mile radius from the main office here in Romulus, so that covers most of upstate New York and into northern Pennsylvania. Our production is split between all major species, with about a third being dairy, a third being hog, and a third being poultry. We rely on Dairy One for forage sampling, milk testing, working with records for our customers and clients, especially on the dairy side, and for feed ingredient testing for all ingredients that come into the milk. I've worked as a dairy nutritionist now for 18 years, and also have a dairy farm of my own at home, a registered Holstein farm in Dryden, which would be about an hour south of here. So I get to see both sides of the coin, so to speak.
I'm Dan Sheldon from Woody Hill Farm in Salem, New York, over northeast of Albany. I'm in partners with my brother and his daughter and her husband. We're currently milking 1,300 cows with 150 dry cows and raising 1,200 heifers besides that. I work closely with the dairy. I don't do much outside work. So I came home from the Peace Corps in '74 and never intended to stay on the farm before that, but started working there in the fall, and here I still am. My interest has always been cows and records, and how much information we can get out of things. Interaction with Dairy One, everything from software to internet services for networks to forage testing, milk testing, manure testing, CAFO to ACS. I think we do everything that Dairy One offers, except maybe, no, we did have some hay samples through the equine something. And not necessarily the zoo forages or the winery. We don't grow grapes, but so we do about everything we can with Dairy One that they can test for the dairy operation.
My name is Andrew Cross, Indian Camp Farmer located in Earlville, New York. It's northern Shenango County. We milk about 450 dry cows. We raise a little over 400 replacements, and we're cropping about 1,100 acres now. I'm in an LLC with my father. One of the more interesting things we do, I guess, is we have a lot of Jersey Holstein crosses on the farm. About 20 to 22% of the milking herd is F1 cross. So we believe it's contributed a lot to a high milk price, and I believe their cows are a lot more efficient at converting feed into components, which is what we're paid on. So we have to keep track of the components pretty close because it causes some issues. If you're just looking at pounds of milk sold, there could be a big variation on what the value of that milk is. As far as Dairy One, We do milk samples, soil samples, forage samples, all of that. We do pull samples from cows several weeks before dry off, mainly looking for any Staph aureus animals. If they are, we have a different protocol for dry off for those animals, and we resample them again after freshening to see if we cleared it up. Then we can make a culling decision at that point. Guess that's it.
Hello. Hi, my name is Amy Vasquez. I am a veterinarian. After I graduated veterinary school, I went out to California. I'm kind of glad to be here in the rain rather than the 105-degree weather with fire. But thinking about my friends, I graduated, went to California, practiced for 5 years, and then decided I hadn't had enough school, so I came back. And I currently, just recently finished my PhD working on milk quality. So right now I work with Quality Milk Production Services, and I'm doing several different projects there, but as far as interacting with Dairy One, we use a lot of the somatic cell count and linear score data from your DHIA testing records to determine which cows we're going to select to either culture, treat with antibiotics if she's a chronic mastitis cow or a current mastitis cow, and also we use these cell counts to drive not only our mastitis treatment decisions, but whether we're going to pull a cow, or also now we're doing some selective dry cow therapy. So in that way, Dairy One has been helpful at supplying that information on our dairy herds.
All right, I've prepared some questions for our panel, but I want to strongly encourage anybody who has a question to raise their hand, and I will inject your question into the program right at the get-go. So the first question is for Gabe. Tell us about some ways you use sample data to increase profit on a dairy farm.
There's a number of different ways that I could answer that. I mean, the simplest and the old standby would be just looking at component records and using that to make diet decisions. Looking at butter, fat, and protein. Are we a little bit low on butter fat? Are there some things we can do to bring that up? Where do we need to go with that diet? And using that component data to calculate the actual energy and protein requirements of that animal. Cattle that are producing higher levels of components, of course, are going to require more nutrients and need to be balanced for accordingly. A specific example that has become more and more common now is MUN testing has become available through many of the milk plants. It's of course available through your Dairy One monthly testing on individual cows, but that's a really great tool to be tracking your protein and carbohydrate balance in the diets. Just as an example, actually this morning even I was on a farm. It's an all Jersey herd, registered Jersey herd, and the last forage change that we had made, butterfat was holding really well. We were kind of in that 5 to 5.2 range, very high component testing herd, and the protein seemed to slip a little bit. We were down to about a 3.7 protein, which for this herd in the summertime, that's actually relatively low. MUNs were running on the high side. We were running around a 17 pretty consistently with the last baleage change that they made. So with the feed update that I made about 2 weeks ago, we were able to drop the feed cost just slightly. We stayed about the same on feed cost, but I was able to adjust the types of protein, the protein degradabilities that I was feeding, and better balance for amino acids. So we ended up with just a slightly reduced feed cost, but we gained about 1.5 points on protein percent with milk staying steady. That resulted in a net gain of about 25 cents a cow without any increase in feed cost. If it weren't for the component values and regular MUN testing, we wouldn't have seen that opportunity was there for us to take advantage of. So that's one example here. Like I said, just this morning I was on that farm and we went through the records to see that we did get the response that we wanted to from the diet change.
Okay, Dan, have you ever seen anything like this on your farm?
It happens in increments, not all of a sudden like that does.
Because I don't use diets.
No. So, just the inventory change we made recently increased the milk volume, decreased the fat slightly, so the jury's still out on whether or not we made any money on it, but I think the change concentrated the ration slightly, and we got through the hot spell without losing any milk, which between fans, water, and maybe a ration change. An interesting thing is the MUN report, which you've got an example of in here, that Dairy One is coming out with. We haven't typically followed MUNs on individual cows, but it is going to be valuable to be able to look at different groups and different parities and stage of lactations to, like you said, monitor how well our rations are working for the cows. And this is one way we can get this information back. I guess that's it for the MUN. We do get the bulk tank MUN all the time and follow that, and we try to keep it in that 8 to 10 range if we can.
Please go ahead, Andrew.
Okay, probably pretty similar what we do. We do not use individual cow MUNs for anything right now. We also use the bulk tank MUN. And our nutritionist and I keep an eye on it for any changes, basically about once a week. Look at components. If there's a big change in one direction or another, then we try to investigate, see if we can figure out what the issue is. We also like to keep our MUNs in the 8 to 10 range. And as far as what exactly you're looking at, that'd be more a question for my nutritionist than for me. But, it's all part of the whole package. You're observing lots of things, and MUNs and components are just one more thing that might give you a clue that there's a bigger issue. So that's all I can say.
Okay, we're going to go back to Gabe for a second. Gabe, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you have an example of the most spectacular ration change you've made using MUNs in terms of increase in profitability on a farm? Can you name
Oh, you want one to increase profitability? I've got some spectacular failures.
I'd like that too.
Yeah, I guess, probably one example would be, especially during the grazing season, for a lot of my dairies that are grazing dairies, I find that MUN and milk components combined can be a really handy diagnostic tool because pasture quality is constantly changing. So you balance that diet May 1st. By the time you're through the second rotation, May 30th, you get into June. Maybe it's rained. Maybe it was like this spring and it didn't rain. You may or may not have pasture. How much is he feeding in the barn? Well, we're feeding a little more. Okay, well, a little more can mean a lot of different things. So using MUN as that diagnostic tool, it can really be handy when you're, I guess, sort of, without that almost going by the seat of your pants, making a stab in the dark. Okay, cows aren't performing. We know there's not as much pasture there. Where is the weak link? How far are we short on protein? We could sample the pasture, but a week later it might be totally different feed. This last a week and a half ago, I had a herd that generally, I guess, is one of those lower service type herds that I don't need to see very often. They do a really good job with grazing and maintaining consistency. And he called me up and said, hey, we're going to need feed again, but the MUNs have dropped down to where they're around 3. And I think that's low, but I'm not sure. What should we do? And we looked at the ration, made some, fairly significant changes with the amount of protein going in. This was before the rain events had come here in the last week or two, so I guess it was about 2 weeks ago. So there wasn't significant pasture regrowth in sight. We made the ration changes, and he responded about 10 pounds of milk based on those changes. That was certainly a positive change. We didn't really have pasture to sample. We were going off of a baleage sample, but knowing that he was going to be splitting dry matter between baleage and pasture, and that ratio was going to change, where do we need to fall? And we were able to make some adjustments before we even got the baleage sample results that gave us the results that we wanted to see in the bulk tank on that feed change.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Next question is about individual animal butter fats and proteins. Dan, you want to tell us how you look at those in your herd?
Individual butter fats and proteins. So we look at them on some group basis to make sure that the 3 different rations we feed are where they're supposed to be. Most of what I use them for in individual cows is we let Dairy Comp or the DHI records give me a energy corrected milk, and that's used mostly for culling decisions after a cow falls below a certain value. We've rarely gone out and looked at an individual cow. She's got a 2-2 test or a 1 protein. She probably ought to be somewhere else anyway. So we like to monitor the whole herd, make sure our fat levels are. Some feedback. Fat and protein levels for the herd are where they should be, and so adjust things in the ration so that we can maintain at least a 4% fat and a 3.1 to 3 over 3.1 protein.
Like I mentioned, we have have a big difference between components on individuals depending on their genetic background in our herd. So we also use energy corrected milk on ours, so it's not, I don't have any big complicated formulas that we use, but it goes in and you will see a big difference. You can have a 70-pound cow and a 90-pound cow giving the same amount of components. So we look at energy corrected milk when making any kind of culling decision. And at the moment, our barn is full and we don't have any plans to expand, so we are just basically cutting cows off the bottom of the list as we need room. I might delve into those a little bit more if things were different, but right now we look at energy corrected milk. And I guess I don't really have to make it any more complicated than that.
Robbie, can you hear me? All right, next question is how might you use individual MUNs within a pen? Let's say, Gabe, you had a pen with highly variable MUNs within the pen. What would that tell you? And how would you manage it? How would you suggest it be managed?
That's one of the areas where MUNs can be a handy diagnostic tool. So most likely, what that tells you is that for some reason you have cows that are consuming a different diet. If you see that wide variation within a pen. That could be that you have cows that have a wide range of days in milk within the same pen, or it could be that you have sorting going on, where if you have an overcrowded pen, you have a group of cows that are coming up and eating the mix that they were intended to get, or sorting out the mix that they were intended to get, and then you have another group of cows coming up to the bump later that are then getting what's left over. So that's going to create some significant level of variation. So probably the first thing that I would look at would be pen crowding, and then the consistency of that TMR and the things that you can do to minimize sorting, adding liquid, adding water, whey, molasses of some sort. Is the dry matter percent on the TMR where it needs to be to minimize sorting? And then is that pen, if it's a either a multi-Paris pen with multiple lactations or multiple days in milk, is there a way that you can group that differently to try to be delivering a more uniform diet to a targeted group of
Share them
animals?
with you, or you can come to me afterwards and I can give you my contact info. Can I borrow your mic?
Sure.
We need to turn that one on. Okay, so the first thing that we can do is generate a list of high somatic cell count cows. That's what's happening here in Dairy Comp. And we need to know, well, we do know that we're generating somatic cell count data based on a composite sample. So one of those quarters, if this cow is high, so this list shows cows that have a somatic cell count greater than 500,000. We know from research that a cow that has higher than 200,000 somatic cell count likely has an infection. So I kind of overshot it a little bit here, and I called for cows with over 500,000 somatic cell count. And our dairies commonly do this after getting a test back a couple days after. They'll generate a list of cows that have high somatic cell count. Now, that's all of the milk from the cow. So we want to figure out which quarter might be affected. And so we'll get that cow while she's milking, and we'll do a CMT or a California mastitis test. And any positive quarter, they'll take a sample, submit it to QMPS. We'll culture that quarter. If it comes back with a treatable organism, we'll look back at the records and see if she's had a high somatic cell count for a very long period of time. And we would make the recommendation to either cull that cow or to go ahead and treat her, because that organism might be responsive to antibiotics. So in that way, we can treat either subclinical mastitis or cull the cows that are chronic. You can advance it. Another simple thing that we can do in dairy comp is type the econ command. And I don't know, have any of you used this command? So if we just type econ in dairy comp, it brings up our bulk tank somatic cell count, and then it lists, I think, the top 40 contributing cows. And then if you put your data in as far as how much milk or how much money you're getting for your milk, it'll list her somatic cell count and her cow value, and it'll also list the percentage that she contributes to the tank. So if she's a high producer, that kind of weighs in as well. And it'll also tell you what your bulk tank will be if you were to remove that cow from the herd. And then if you put in prices, it'll tell you how much more money you would make if you took that cow out of the tank. So this is a really good tool. Another thing that we can do is we can use test day data, so the previous test day data and the most recent test day data, to generate graphs that look like this. So this red line here are cows that are at a new risk of being infected. So that's the number of cows that have a high somatic cell count at this test, so over 200,000, divided by the number of cows that had low somatic. On a monthly basis, we can look at these records and see if you're doing a good job, or we need to do more things to improve your new risk of infection. So the other thing that we can look at is our chronic cows. So these are the cows that are 2 somatic cell counts in a row, so 2 months in a row have somatic cell counts higher than 200,000. Those are the red bars here. And so we can monitor the number of chronic cows you've got over the course of the year and see if it's going up or down. And we can click on these bars and it will generate the cows that are contributing to those, within dairy comp, the cows that are contributing to those bars. Now if you have paper records, you can just follow your cows. And if she has a high somatic cell count on this test, you can look back to the last month and see if she also has a high somatic cell count. And then you have to tabulate the number of cows. And this green line is the cure risk. So these are cows that have low somatic cell count, under 200,000 on the current test, and had high somatic cell count in the last test. So we want that number to be high. So we want our cure risk to be high and increasing or just kind of staying stable. And then we can break it down by lactation. So if you're wondering if your lactation 1 animals are worse off than your lactation 2 and above, we can just look at those animals to determine whether those are the animals that are in need of remediation. And then also we can look to see how your dry cow program is working out for you. So are cows getting infections during the dry period? Is something happening at dry off that might be contributing to a high number of infections in early lactation? And so we can, in DairyComp, also use this command to generate a line that has the percentage of cows that are high at fresh. So their first test day, once they started lactating, was high, was above 200,000. And our benchmark is about 15% that we shoot for. So this dairy was increasing over the last couple of months. So certainly something that we can look at. And then we can also look to see if your heifers are freshening in with high somatic cell counts, and that might be contributing to a higher bulk tank. And so that's just one test day data, so that's their first test. We can look back to see what their dry test, so the last test of their lactation, what the last test of their lactation looked like. So in this little chart here, I've got the dry linear score or somatic cell count on this axis, and the first linear score or somatic cell count in their next lactation. And so I can look at it by quadrant, so I can determine how many cows cured over the dry period, how many cows were newly infected, fresh, how many were not infected to begin with, and how many are chronically infected. So this quadrant here, 53%, or 53% of animals were healthy on this dairy over the dry period. These cows in this quadrant here, 13%, those are cows that are chronic, so they had high somatic cell counts from the beginning when you dried them off. These are cows that acquired infections, so these are cows that are picking up infections over the dry period, that's 16%, and then 17% were cured. And you can do this on a monthly basis to see if your levels are going up or going down. And speaking of dry cow therapy, our most recent project has been selective dry cow cows that dry off with antibiotics, but we're showing that most farms are doing a really good job of drying their cows off, and a lot of cultures that we take when cows are dried off are negative. So that kind of shows the idea was there's a lot of people out there that culture a couple days before dry off and then treat based on culture, but that's an added expense. You've got to bring the cow through the parlor, you've got to take the sample, you've got to submit it, you've got to read the results, and then you've got to make a decision on whether to treat that cow or not. So we did a protocol where we just used somatic cell count data and mastitis records to determine who would get treated. So if a cow had a high somatic cell count above 200 over the last 3 tests, or had more than 1 case of mastitis, she was treated with blanket dry cow therapy. However, if she maintained a low somatic cell count and only had 1 or less cases of mastitis, we didn't treat her with antibiotics. So we were able to use this test day data, as well as the records on your farm, to determine who to treat. And we do have dairies that are not really using dairy comp, but are just using the paper records and looking at, the list of their dry cows or the cows that they want to dry and their somatic cell counts to determine who to treat. But we have it automated. I've worked with Steve Eicher, and we have it automated now to print off a list at the day of dry off of cows to be treated and not treated, as well as put an automatic dry event into the cow card, which seems to be really well accepted by the dairies that are using it. So this is kind of a list, an example of the cows at one dairy that we did this with. So if I were to zoom in, it would have the cow's ID, her previous somatic cell counts, and then for we have a no drug and tomorrow, depending on how they wanted to treat her. And so it's been really great working with the farms to get this established, as well as using the records to make these decisions. I think that's all I have. So I think the questions are for these guys as far as how they're using their records to improve their milk quality. Sorry, I'm taking over your role.
Great. So go ahead, Andrew.
We use the Econ, the quality analyzer on dairy comp as well to pick out cows that are high cell and also ones that are chronically high celled. And depending on how full the barn is, we make a decision whether to treat her, get rid of her. Usually someone that's had high cell count 2 months in a row, we'll usually just cull her unless she's close to dry off. It's kind of, I don't have any hard guidelines that I follow. A lot of this stuff is kind of I look at the information and make a gut decision. So I know some of the numbers punchers at Cornell don't like you to do things that way, but that's how I look at it. And since our barn is full, we've had really good milk quality for quite a number of years, so I don't really have to do a lot of looking at the records and analyzing things. And since our co-op doesn't really pay much, if anything, for milk quality, I don't find a huge incentive to try and fine-tune anything in that regard.
Well, our milk co-op does pay pretty good for milk quality. So it is quite expensive. Our somatic cell count for the whole herd falls below 100,000 for the month. So every cow that has visible mastitis at milking is segregated to a different group. I primarily in the morning milk that segregated group. We CMT quarters on cows, sample the quarter. We use tri-plates to culture it on farm. Cows that have indications of streps will get treated. Staphs and gram-negatives, E. coli or Klebsiella will not. A lot of cows will self-cure with this if they have a staph. Those cows that are segregated will, when milk either visibly looks good or gets treated and looks good, if they'll pass my CMT analysis, which is eyeball, that they'll go back in the milking strain. So far we've been fairly successful at doing this over the last 3 years. I think we've missed 2 months premium for at least the first level. It has multi-levels in it. So I created a list for after test day that gives me the cows that have had more than one linear score over 4 for the last successive test days. And those are the cows that will not have visible mastitis, but yet contribute to the list. And I'll also go through econ every once in a while to see who's there. Those are sometimes cows that'll spike a high on test day and may not have anything actually wrong with them, but they've cured it and gone on since then. So dry treatment, we do dry treat every cow. Still at this point, we haven't yet moved to selective dry cow treatment, and that's been under discussion with our veterinarian, and it's possible we'll start at some time.
So Dan, keep the mic. What do you do with the high somatic cell count cows that you find on tests that are normal? Do they go into your segregated group, or what do you do?
Yeah, well, so if they have more than 1 quarter off and any other strike against them, they'll probably have a different career.
We're all going to work at McDonald's someday. Okay, Dr. Vasquez, what's the potential savings for selective dry cow therapy? In your mind, you're allowed to give opinions. We're not at Cornell.
So if you do have if you can do selective treatment based on your monthly test somatic cell counts, you can save about $7 a cow. And that's kind of assuming that some of the cows are going to get treated. So for a whole herd, on a whole herd basis, it would be about $7 a cow. And that compares to if you were to use culture, which I think is about $250 a cow that you'd save with selective treatment, and that's assuming the cost of labor and the cost of tubes and culture plates, and the labor to read the culture plates. So, depending on how large your farm is, not too much, but then you have to think about, public health concerns and residues in the bulk tank, and you'd be lowering your risk in that sense as well. We did this project on a very large dairy, one of the projects, on a pretty large dairy. And I should say that they ended up getting premiums for selling their cull cows because the person that was buying their cull cows found that they were trying to reduce their antibiotic use, and they did use selective treatment. So they were able to get a premium for their beef just because they were using selective treatment on their dairy. So that's another economic benefit that could be considered.
Okay, this question's for all of you, and you're all required to answer. I'm a former teacher. I can do those kinds of things. What I'd like you to do is tell me, if I'm a farmer and I'm considering backing off on testing, please tell me why I shouldn't.
Do the farmers want to answer first?
I think the somatic cell count's pretty important, because if you start to develop a problem with Staph aureus or something subclinical, how else are you going to find it?
I'm an information nut to begin with, so any information I can get is great. It's a matter of using it the right way to make yourself money. There's many economic studies that have shown that herds on test are at least $35 a cow a head on profitability over the cow's lifetime. So it's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. And you can't manage anything unless you have the information to do it with. So I really don't understand how people can manage farms to a fine tune without actually having records to work with.
I guess I would just agree with what Andrew and Dan said already. I think it's, it comes down to missed opportunities. Anyone that is still in the dairy business today isn't here by accident. You're in the business because you're doing things right, you've done things right, and you don't forego the opportunities that come your way. If you don't know what those opportunities are, you can't take advantage of them. And if you don't have that data, you can't manage it.
Response.
Like
So if
Dan
something
said.
goes wrong, you become reactive, and then you've got to kind of patch it up. And I think that'd be more work than being proactive and looking at your data month after month.
Okay, this next question is for our farmers. Tell us how you use test date data to make breeding decisions, genetic decisions. I'm really interested in your crossbred program, so you can talk about that if you want.
I can't, I'm not sure if there's anything in the test date information that does anything for our breeding program.
Butterfat, protein.
I mean, it all contributes to their, to PTAs and stuff, which is something we look at a little bit. But I can tell you how we do some of our breeding program, but I'm not sure how much the DHI testing contributes to that. If you're interested.
I am.
We breed our virgin heifers with some of them. I'm trying to think of the numbers right now. I don't have a hard number right now. I go through a sheet every couple of months and mark which animals are going to get bred. And we breed about 20% of our virgin heifers to sexed Holstein and about 25 to 30% of them to sexed Jersey semen, because Jersey bulls are worthless. And then the rest are just normal Holsteins. We breed them 2 times with sexed semen if they're getting sexed semen. If they don't stick, we'll try them once with conventional, and then that's it. 3 services with conventional for the ones that are not getting sexed semen. And we have too many replacements, so if we don't get them bred after 3 services, they're gone. And then conversely, in the milking herd, we will try breeding the first calf heifers conventionally 3 times, second lactation and older twice. If they don't stick, we'll try them 1 or 2 more times with an Angus sire. And again, that's a simple overview. We're trying to advance genetics as quickly as we can. That's why we concentrate on the heifers and first lactation animals. And like I said, about 21 or 2% of the herd is F1 cross and so on and so forth. We keep track of the parentage for 3 generations, and then we basically qualify them as being Holstein again.
Okay, so who gets Jersey semen? Which heifers get Jersey semen and which heifers get Holstein semen?
The top Holsteins by PTA average, PTA $, whichever one you look at. The top 20% or so will get Holstein, sexed Holstein semen, and then after that it's just kind of about random, like roughly every 3rd animal gets Jersey, and the rest of them get conventional Holstein. It's not complicated. It could probably be more complicated, but it's doing the job so far.
Dan?
No specific test day data, however, all of the PTAs and net merits and everything on the animals we used to breed trial all came from test day data to begin with. So basically we use all young sires on the milking herd. The bottom quartile of the milking herd is currently being bred to Angus. It's based on PTA. We did not do an extensive amount of genomic testing. Heifers, again, I think it's the first top 50% PTA get sex semen at least once, if not twice. Some of the bottom end of the heifers are, I don't think we're using Angus on yet, but probably will through some of the animals that are on the lower side of that. And because we have limited facilities and too many animals, we've started a list every month now of animals not to raise heifer calves from, again based on the PTA ranking, and so we can limit ourselves to the 50 or 60 heifers a month that we do need. Because we can real easily freshen 70 and 80, have 70 or 80 heifers get born in a month, and that does stuff up the system a little bit. So we're trying some of those schemes to manage our inventories.
Okay, please join me in thanking our panel.